Welcome to The Weekly, a podcast brought to you by Calvary Bible Church with your hosts, Jay Ewing, and like always, well, sometimes nowadays, Thomas Milburn. What's up, Thomas?
It is sometimes.
Sometimes. We have so many great people on staff now. We got to get people on.
That's right. I am. If you don't know this, I'm the low man of the totem pole at Calvary Bible Church. So
at one time you were.
I am thankful that you have found time on the podcast schedule to host me. Thank you, Jay.
Hey, I want to start off this podcasting day recording with one thing, a confession.
Don't worry, it'll just be just between us.
Yeah, totally. I love Keith Green. Do you know who Keith Green is?
I'm familiar.
If you were a Christian before 1988, you know who Keith Green was. If you were born before 1988 and a Christian, you know who Keith Green was. He is some of the best Christian music you could ever listen to is Keith Green. That's my one of my favorite loves.
Is Keith Green's music.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense of a lot of things that I've had questions about. There is something true about, it's funny. I was just talking to, I think it was David Fresh about this. Like what Keith Green did for a generation of Christians to bring them into worship.
Yeah.
We were talking about who do you think could possibly do that again for Christians?
Totally.
Because a lot of musical artists now are just artists.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And there's just not a Keith Green out there.
Totally. My sister-in-law, her favorite love is, and I actually thinking about this today with my kids, taking them to school, we were listening to Shane and Shane. That's her favorite band of all time. Like that's all she listens to. Old
stuff or new stuff?
Both. Like everything about them, she listens
Really?
to. Yeah.
Okay.
And my kids and I were talking about who our favorite Christian bands were, you know? And I was like, I love Keith Green. It was amazing.
I'm surprised you didn't say Newsboys.
Nope.
DC Talk.
You know, I was a Christian post when they were like the coolest of cool.
Yeah.
So other bands were replacing them when I became a Christian, as much as I know of them. Yeah. But I would love to hear from the people that listen to The Weekly. Write us at theweekly, calvarybible.com. Let us know who your favorite Christian band, artist was of all time.
Is Nirvana considered a Christian band?
Were you a kid of Nirvana back in your middle school days? I just remember
there was a magazine. I don't even know if it's in print anymore. Like a popular Christian magazine. And I remember being in my teens and the article was, why does Satan get all the good music?
Oh my goodness.
And I thought that kind of sums it up. Why is all the good music out there?
Yeah, totally.
Not rubber stamped Christian with a fish sold in a bookstore somewhere.
A Christian bookstore.
Christian bookstore.
Yeah. You know, that's true. And also there have been Christians who have been great artists too over the centuries. So there's some out there. I think Switchfoot, I mean, those guys have been cranking great music out for like 30 years now.
They've been cranking music out. Okay, so U2. Is
Oh.
U2 a Christian band?
No, but they will be leading worship in heaven someday.
Yeah?
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay.
No doubt. Bono has to be there leading at least one song a day. In heaven.
I don't even know where this is going. All right, give announcements and let's start talking.
CalvaryBible.com is a great place to find out what's happening on your campus. You can select that. Also, the Church Center app is there on the bottom of the homepage. Get that. You can click mobile bulletin. You can click prayer requests. We would love to be praying for you. Oh, my goodness. We love praying for you. As well as you can click at the very bottom, the podcasts, catch up on episodes you missed on the weekly, or the message that you missed because you went skiing on a Sunday or soccer. We know that life happens, so stay connected at Calvary with that app, Church Center. Also, if you're new to Calvary, we would love to see you at Starting Point. Starting Point, it's happening on all of our campuses really soon, so you want to go to calvarybible.com/startingpoint. Sign up today. It's a great place for you to meet the staff to get to meet you and your family. We just love hanging out with you. So go to calvarybible.com, sign up for Starting Point. Some other big things are happening here at Calvary. We got refugees that we're working with. Also, we have Heart of Advent coming up really soon. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now because Details are getting fleshed out, but you want to stay up to date. So CalvaryBible.com is a great place to do that. All right, Thomas, that's my announcements.
Sweet. There's a lot happening at Calvary going into a busy, probably holiday season.
Yeah, really awesome holiday season.
Starting with trick-or-treating.
Yes, trick-or-treating, which your favorite holiday is happening in these 3 months, but it's not what we expect most often. It's Thanksgiving is your favorite holiday, isn't it?
After Easter.
You like Easter?
Well, Jesus did rise from the dead.
But you say...
I say Thanksgiving is the best holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it the best holiday for you?
It's the best holiday for everyone. They just have failed to realize it. Do you like Thanksgiving? I do.
Yeah, I like Thanksgiving because the Cowboys play on Thanksgiving.
There you go. So that's the football part.
Oh, yeah.
So you get to watch some football.
Yes.
There's food.
Yes.
There's family.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's fun.
Yes.
Which is like games, activities, board games.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
awesome.
And
no obligations of presents.
That's exactly it. There's no pressures of presents. So
oh my God. Okay, is your family a formal family where you have to dress up to attend Thanksgiving dinner, or do y'all arrive in like casual wear, or do you arrive in sweatpants? Like, what is your family tradition on this? Does everyone wear a tie? You know, all that type.
It's different. So everyone, I think, does put a collared shirt on. I wouldn't say they're dressed up.
Yeah.
But like you're cooking all day.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Colorado dress.
Yeah.
That could be anything. But the goal really, and we've done better some years and others not so well. But when Kristen and I think of a great Thanksgiving, it needs to the meal needs to happen at 2:00.
Mm.
We've had some late, 4 p.m.s, and it's pushing it. 6:00 is too late.
Whoa, 6:00 is like,
But if you go before 2, then you're up too early doing all the cooking. Like
right.
It takes me a long time to get all my dishes on the table.
Totally.
Pies, everything. So 2:00 is kind of the prime time because you want to eat again in the second meal.
Yeah, totally.
So if you eat at 2 and you feast till 3, I'm not really ready to go for round 2 until probably 5.
Yeah.
Or if you start at 4, see, that's the problem. You start at 4, it's pushing too late.
Totally. I understand that. My favorite thing of Thanksgiving is post 2:00. Yeah, we eat at like 1, 2, right? It also stretches out your breakfast because you can wake up, start cooking, and then eat some breakfast while you're cooking a little bit. So
get like cinnamon rolls or something.
Yeah, totally. But my favorite thing is that post. Oh, I'm a little hungry. I'm gonna go like just pick some things. You know what I mean? And they're cold. Maybe some of them been in the fridge right now. I love that meal. That's my favorite meal.
Pretty good.
It is pretty good. And then you got Christmas coming, and I love Christmas. I don't love Christmas Day because it means it's over. I love the time before Christmas, that Christmas is coming.
All right. So I just slipped into a quick depression.
Yeah.
Thinking about Christmas in October, but I'm back. Shake it off.
Okay. So one of the reasons why I bring up Keith Green is he always shared publicly with his wrestles with faith. And I think he shared them in his music, in his life, in his story. You know, we're in a really interesting preach here with Abraham in chapter 6 of Hebrews. I do have a point of why I confessed Keith Green this morning. My love. What do you think about Abraham? As you started to study, reflect on, hear some preaching on Abraham, what do you think of Abraham?
Well, I think specifically to what happened this weekend. So I was out of Colorado this weekend. So on the Erie campus, specifically, Mark Luby, who's one of the pastors of our global missions, he spoke. And he spoke about Abraham, and he used this word dissonance. And I don't think Perry and Boulder or John Online or Thornton used it, but this idea that there's a lack of agreement between two things, and usually it's between something that's true and something that's believed to be true. So he kind of opened up with this question, what did you believe to be true about your life? And then now you're living that reality. And what was the dissonance between kind of hopes and dreams and then reality? And he connected it with Abraham, with God, who is truth. And God swears by this oath. So he's going to tell Abraham a truth statement. And then Abraham has to live into that truth statement. But there's a lot of dissonance, a disagreement. It seems like God's slow to fulfill his promise. He has to kind of work out, like, how is God going to fulfill his promise? Because it doesn't seem like that matches his reality. And so Mark was pointing out, and I think I see this in the story of Abraham here in Hebrews, of how do you live by faith? How do you live by trusting what God said is true and just maybe not seeing it, experiencing it, feeling it to be true? Mm-hmm. And then that's kind of the Christian walk. I think a lot of Christians can relate to that, where I know what God has said to be true about his presence, his Holy Spirit, power over sin and death, and yet it feels like it's just not realized.
Yeah, I still have to wake up, shower, eat breakfast, and go to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the benchmark, though, is in order to have dissonance, it has to be against something that is true.
Right.
So God makes a truth statement here. What's that truth statement that he makes?
Yeah, let's dive into that. So what is the brief biographical sketch of Abraham that you would want everyone to know about?
Abraham is the father of Israel.
Okay.
So God makes this promise to him back in Genesis, in the very beginning, that he's going to call Abram out from where he's living to move to another location, a land that he doesn't know.
He was in Ur.
He's in Ur, he's going to Canaan.
Yeah.
And from Abraham, he's going to have all these descendants and offspring, children upon children upon children. Him and Sarah are going to have this.
Yeah, God seems to do these amazing visits and dreams and visions and arrivals, right, to declare this stuff to him over a long period of time while he's traveling and moving about. And it's just really interesting for sure. Yeah,
so he says in chapter 12, verse 2, to Abram, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So this is just an incredible statement that he's going to call a man. Just think about this, like name two of Abram's neighbors.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, out of all the earth still talks about Abram. John made this point in his message when you think of, okay, so God says all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed through you. So I'm going to bless you so that you're a conduit of blessings. You're not a container of it, but you're a conduit of it. And then you look around the world, and the three largest world religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, all have this high esteem of Abraham.
Yeah, he's the father of all the...
He's the father of all this. And even if I go talk to my Hindu neighbor, they have a high view of Jesus and Abraham as well.
Yeah.
So you think, oh my goodness, how is it the world is still talking about a man named Abraham? That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It must mean that God was good on his promise.
Right.
To some degree, that we're even talking about it. He didn't just disappear into history.
Totally. So Abraham gets his promise, and he's at that age, 75-ish?
Yeah.
75-ish? But God doesn't fulfill that promise till he's 100. So he has 25 years.
25 years.
I haven't even been a Christian 25 years yet. How crazy is that?
Yeah. Just let that settle for a second. Because in Hebrews 6, and we didn't get to talk about this much, where did I put it? He's swearing an oath to Abraham. And in verse 15, and thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. Now,
he really didn't patiently wait. Well, if you know Abraham's story.
25 years though, right?
Right.
Like, that gets summed up in 3 words. Having patiently waited. And Abraham's like, I'd like to add some more words to that. Like 25 years, and the things that I had to go through, the way that I felt discouraged. Where is God? Is he going to show up on this promise? But he kept going back to God being faithful because God made an oath, right?
God did make an oath.
What do we need to know about God making that oath?
That's a really good question. It's interesting because there's a philosopher that Mark referenced over Sunday, and his name is Immanuel Kant, and he was a philosopher, and he had this idea, especially around this Abraham story that we're about to get to, of Abraham and Isaac, of that Abraham made the mistake of actually trusting God. He should have trusted himself and reason. And what Kant is referencing is that man's the center of morality. And so Kant is trying to replace God within the Western culture of God is your ultimate reality. Now man is, which we see this play out now. Like, I know philosophy is boring, but there's
philosophy is awesome.
To most people, it's like really confusing and hard, but these philosophers actually have such influential writings over history. But when God swears by himself, that means he cannot swear of anything in higher. You and I can swear of like on our mom's grave. Mark makes that, I would never do that, Mom. She listens. We can swear on, the Bible and legal senses. Sometimes we have to do that in the defense. We can swear by all these things. Jerusalem in Israel's time, Jesus' time, people will swear by the temple because it's something greater than them.
It's because it's greater than them, right?
It's greater than...
You're trying to get some credibility to your statement.
Right.
But
totally.
What's greater than God?
Yeah, so he has to say, I am it. And there's nothing greater. I have to swear by myself because I'm the ultimate truth. And that's the reality of like our lives today, is that most often we are the reality of truth. So we're doing Immanuel Kant what he thought was the most reasonable thing to do. And in fact, we forget that God is the supreme being, ultimate reality, ultimate truth. And the writer of Hebrews encourages us. It says, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie. So that's another thing about God's character. It's impossible. If God says something, he cannot take it back, or he cannot lie about it, which is, you and I, we can lie all day. We can take things back. We can promise to our kids, hey, we'll go take you skating tomorrow, and then tomorrow happens, like, we're not taking you skating. We can go back on our word. God cannot. And that's just so important for us, is that in our reality, in our day-to-day, the super practical, and I think Mark was making this point, and I think I was wrestling with it during the message itself, but do I believe that God is the ultimate authority in my life? Do I believe that because he's the ultimate authority, and I can trust that he cannot lie to me, that he cannot change, what encouragement and comfort that gives me in my day-to-day life? And the implications are huge. I mean, the Bible's all about this God that's unchangeable, who cannot lie. And the implications for Abram, for Jacob, for David, for Solomon, for Mary, for Hannah, for Ruth, all these beautiful characters of the Bible, is that God is faithful to his promise, and he will not change that promise. And you and I have to believe in this as well, and we're invited to actually believe this and walk by faith that God has promised things in our life. One, that he loves us unconditionally. Two, that he's out for our ultimate good. Like, that's so important for us to remember. Three, he wants us to flee from sin, to become holy like he's holy. These are all things that we've got to live into, and it comes down to this. Do we believe God is the ultimate reality? And you have to wrestle with that. And that has to haunt you. And that has to really seep deep down in your being and say, okay, if God's ultimate reality, if I trust that, I know that whatever he says, he promises, cannot change, and he will not lie to me. That's amazing. That's like a world shaping. And it is we call that the worldview of Christianity, but that's world shaping for us as individuals as well.
Yeah. Because you get yourself into some prickly situations.
Oh, yeah.
You say, no, this shouldn't have happened if God was true. This shouldn't have happened if God was, you fill in the blank.
Right.
And so you have to live a very real life in light of God's promises.
Right. Totally. And that's hard to do, because as we're picking up in 6 in these themes of Abraham, and as we read Abraham's story, there's a lot of middle season. And what I say by middle season is the promise was 25 and 100 years later it comes. Like, I mean, the promise is 75, 25 years, and the promise comes at 100. That's a long time. That's a middle season of doubt, which is part of the human experience, suffering, discouragement, turmoil. Those things happen to Abraham. And that's what the writer of Hebrews is saying is like, look at Abraham. Ultimately, God did not lie. And Jesus is greater than even Abraham. Jesus is greater than all these other characters. And so it's just a building of our faith. And, I'm going to ask this question to you. Like, how do you see the middle season, those 25 years play out in Abraham's life? What happens in those years that are chaotic, confusing, discouraging, sinful at times? What do you see there in his story?
I pretty much just see my own story.
Yeah, totally. That's honest. That is so honest, Thomas. That's so honest.
I know what I believe, and there's, if you want to use Mark's word of dissonance, like there's some dissonance of what I believe and how I live. Yeah. And I think this is where, when we talk about this podcast, trying to connect what we heard on Sunday to your real life lived, getting some application. I think you want to keep living into what you know to be true.
Yeah.
So if you just put yourself in Abram's shoes, this God has called him and told him, hey, I'm going to bless you.
Yeah.
And you're going to have this offspring. You're going to have a child. All the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. You're like, yes. And he's like, I'm going to take you to a new land. Follow me to the new land.
Yeah.
And so
his calling and his direction is super clear. Like in most of our stories, it's not that clear.
It's not that clear.
So Abraham has a head start than us, right?
Yeah.
In that. But then.
So I think in these 25 years, he has to learn to trust God. He has to learn who God is. I think we often take Old Testament stories and we look at the character of the human and we say, okay, what principles of this human do we apply to ourselves to be more like Sarah, be more like Abraham, be more like, fill in the blank. I think the storyteller is actually say, okay, let me tell you this human story that you're going to find yourself in so that it reveals a characteristic of who God is, right, so that you know more and more of who God is so that you can trust him in your own story.
Yeah.
So what does Sarah and Abraham reveal to us about God? Well, he ain't in a hurry to fulfill his promises, but he will fulfill his promises. I think what we see is Abraham learns to trust who God is. And then when we get to this moment of Isaac, he's learned to trust God for who he is.
Yeah. But
so
he did some funny things in between.
Okay. So here's the first one. Okay. Let's put ourselves in Abram's situation, right? So Jay, I have a brand new land for you to go to. So just leave Erie, come with me to this new land. And this land is connected to the promise of a people and a blessing and a future. So you get there. This is Genesis 12. We're talking like 6 verses in. You've arrived. You're pitching your tents in there. And then verse 10 starts off with, now there was a famine in the land. Mm-hmm. So the first experience you have of God's promised land is a famine. You're like, this land's not so good.
Yeah, it's like us going from Erie to like Kansas. It's like, what's up with this place? It's like, promise.
You arrive there and it's like, okay, so this is the God I'm supposed to trust?
Yeah.
This is how good his promises are? As I get to this land and immediately the land lacks production.
Oh my gosh.
That I have to leave.
Yeah.
And so verse 10 says, now there's a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there.
So he has to leave the land immediately to go to Egypt.
I don't know what the timeline on that is biblically, like in the
it's
text
a long
here.
Story. Yeah, it's a long story.
But you think, let's give it some more time. Let's say it's 3 years. Like, oh, this is great. This is great. How much more do you feel defeated when the land all of a sudden lacks to produce?
Right.
Like, oh, this is that God.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true for us. Like, hey, come be a Christian. Have your sins forgiven. And then there's new hardships just being a Christian in the world. Mm-hmm. Or there's just new struggles that when we start revealing our sin, there's things we don't want to live with anymore. And we're trying to get rid of them. We can't get rid of them. You think, gosh, there seems to be a famine of God's promises in my life.
Totally.
So he heads down to Egypt, which is always interesting, Israel's story with Egypt, going there for help.
Well, this is a tangent, but like Jesus, Moses, Abraham, Jacob all have to come out of Egypt.
Yeah.
That's amazing to me.
Just log that into your mind.
And just meditate, just chew on that. Yeah.
It's a huge part of the story. So they go down to Egypt to trust there, but apparently Sarah is an attractive woman.
Yeah.
And Abram gets scared.
He's scared.
And so what does Abram tell his wife?
Yeah, you're my sister now.
Yeah.
Pretend.
We're going to tell everybody you're my sister.
Yeah. And here's the thing. He's legitimate. You're like, oh, man, Abram, what are you doing? But he just came through famine. He's in discouragement mode. He's in protection mode. They're suffering. They're going to Egypt to find food.
But who's he trying to protect?
Yeah, himself.
It's himself.
He's himself.
He throws his wife under the bus. Now, we would be looking at this and say, oh, goodness gracious. Like, what you should have said is, God who's faithful, God who promises, God who can't lie.
But we don't do that.
We should say, oh, you just go down there. You'll be fine, Abram, because you and Sarah are going to have a promised child.
Yeah.
No.
He's human.
He's human.
Yeah. It reminds me that there's not really many heroes of the Bible because the whole point is God's the hero.
That's right. So Sarah, the king of Egypt finds her attractive, takes
That's
her.
a crazy story.
And it is a great story. God totally intervenes, so Sarah's not violated, and she's returned. And
Abram's blessed from it. That the king blesses Abram.
tells him to get out of town.
And gives him like all the stuff. Yeah.
So they're out. And then, you just think, okay, they have another season where he's having to trust God. Mm-hmm. He has a separation with him and Lot, his family member.
He has family discord. Like,
Is God going to be faithful?
You think your family's messed up? Just read Abram's. He has a crazy family.
All right, so now it's Sarah's turn to trust God.
Right.
So many years go by, and they're still childless.
Yep.
So maybe to help God fulfill his promises,
which we all do.
Sarah's like, well, we could expedite this thing.
Yeah.
Let's have you have a child with my servant.
Oh, gosh.
So this is chapter 16.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Abram listened to the voice of Sarah, and he thinks this is a good idea. What would we say? Like, Abram, what you should have said is, God's faithful to an oath. God always comes through with his promises. Hang in there. Trust God.
Yeah.
No, they have this child.
They try to expedite God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not the child that God promised him. He said, you and Sarah are going to have a child.
Gosh.
So with his servant Hagar, they have this child named Ishmael,
who becomes actually the thread to Islam eventually.
It's interesting. God, just in his kindness, meets her.
Yeah.
Says, hey, you're not forgotten. I'm going to bless you. So I think God's kindness gets to be revealed again there. It's funny, from that story of trying to expedite God's promises or trying to, accomplish them for him instead of waiting for them. My wife has this phrase in our family: "Don't burden Ishmael."
That's a great.
She's like, I know God's going to show up, but maybe we should do this in the meantime. She's like, you don't want to burden Ishmael.
Yeah.
Like, just be patient, wait on the Lord.
Totally.
So there's another episode. They go back down to Egypt.
This is funny because Ishmael and that whole family line is really tumultuous for Israel for the rest of the story of Israel.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. They have to leave. They have to live in the curse of expediting God.
Yeah.
For the rest of their story.
And that's that's us, not trusting God. Like, what's in our life that we wish wasn't in our life?
Yeah.
Because we didn't trust God.
And what did we expedite that we're now living the curse of? We tried to outrun God, outpace God, outdo God. And we're that's just a human thing. Like, it's what we're prone to do. So we get to, we get to this birth narrative, right? And Sarah doesn't even believe that's going to happen in her old age.
So they get even older. That's the thing, is God is delayed.
Right.
What we would say is delayed. There's this dissonance of he promised. What's happening? Nothing's happening. I'm not getting younger. It's not like, he gave it to us when we were really young.
Right.
And then when we came of maturity, now we're physically able to be in this season of promise. No, they expedite that season.
They live past it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things aren't looking better for them. It's looking worse.
It's looking more and more foolish and ridiculous.
And I think that's God just, if he's going to start something, a new family line, that the whole family's going to have to trust him for forever.
Right.
I'm going to do something that's so audacious that you'll never forget.
Yep.
And so Sarah's laughing at this, and then finally they're able to have Isaac.
Oh my goodness.
It's just incredible. So 21, The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. So finally the Lord fulfills what he has promised. So then that's where we get to this narrative of 22 we were looking at. After these things, after Isaac's been born, and he's probably a young man at this point,
Right.
God tested Abraham, and said to him, and kind of gives this whole narrative of
Okay, but this is I thought God doesn't test us.
Why do you say that?
Well,
You mean tempt us or test us?
okay. See, I think that's sometimes the confusing part of the Christian journey, because James says he doesn't tempt us. But does God test us? Explain that one to us, Mr. Pastor.
Good luck, buddy. I think we're testing what is genuine faith, right? What is genuine faith? And I think if you're going to go back to God is sovereign, and you're going to believe that God is in control, if you're going to believe that God is good, then he's probably going to, like a good father, bring discipline, bring testing, bring a genuineness of your faith that's going to come out as stronger, refined. I think even in all these seasons, like whether God tested Abraham with the famine, doesn't say so in the text, or what's he going to do when he gets to Egypt, these are all tests of, do you really believe and trust God? And I think those episodes are just quick highlights of not yet, not fully. And I think that's true in my own story, is I have a lot of not yet, not fully moments.
Yeah.
But the Isaac episode here, I think, is the revealing of Abraham's tested faith of, okay, you get it.
Yep. Totally.
More fully.
Can we go? Yeah, and I want to get there, but the middle season is usually meant for refinement. So if you're in that season of like discouragement, suffering, testing, if you want to say it that way, it's meant to refine you to something better. And I know that's hard, and it's not very easy to do, and it's sort of complex, you know what I mean? And I don't want to cheese it up, and make it Christianized, but middle seasons of desert, so that's how the ancients called it. Darkness, that's how some of the ancients called it as well. Dark nights of the soul, those type of things are meant to refine us, because God is a God who doesn't want to keep us where we're at, no matter if it's painful or not.
Yeah.
I think that's really important for us to remember.
Another word the Bible uses besides refining that I think is helpful is formation, right? So when you think of formation, you're being formed into something. So refining is I'm extracting things that don't belong. So I'm purifying something, which is great. Formation is I'm actually building, shaping something. And that's a lifelong process. So when I become a Christian and I give my life to Jesus, that's the beginning of a formation.
Right.
Though it's legally true that I'm right with God. Amen. No sins,
Crazy.
past, present, future,
It's amazing.
are going to be held against me because of Christ. And now I have this process of being formed. Another word is sanctified, right? I'm formed into the likeness of Jesus, to fully trust the Father like Jesus trusted the Father, to fully listen to the Father's voice as Jesus listened to the Father's voice.
Right.
To have love formed in me, all of these things. And that's the process of faith, which some people I think get really discouraged by, because I think they just want to have arrived.
Yeah, it's hard to suffer. It's hard to live by faith. It's hard to step into difficult circumstances. It's just hard.
But if you know the end, right? Like the goal of this is a formation to where I have my faith more realized, it's a fuller understanding of who God is. Ultimately, it with sight with the Lord. But I don't know, I think every moment that comes then is this moment of, all right, Lord, what do you want to form in me that I would know you better? And so we just look at Abraham's story. This is a little bit like, hindsight, Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
But famine in the land. Okay, Lord, you brought me to this land. I didn't come to this land. You brought me to this land. Now it's not producing for my family. What is it that you want to form in me that I might see you and trust you more? all right, Lord, Sarah's getting older. I'm getting older. I don't see how the promise is coming together. What is it in this season you want to form in me? And I think if each person just postured themselves before the Lord, even in today's culture, like, man, Lord, I am so angry about mandates. I'm so angry about mass vaccines. I'm angry about the country.
We're going there?
Yes. Well, whatever. It's like real.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I'm angry
Totally.
about the church. Why is the church not doing X? Or why is the church doing Y? Lord, what is being stirred up in me? Why am I afraid? Why am I angry? Why am I whatever?
Yeah.
And what do you want to refine in me that doesn't belong to the things of Jesus? And what do you want to form in me that I look more like Christ tomorrow?
And the question is, are you trying to outpace God in some of these things?
Because you can only ask that question to God if you trust him.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't trust him, then I think I'm going to take the plan into my own hands.
Or you can only ask that question if you believe in this fundamental truth that he can only swear on himself. He's the ultimate authority.
Yeah. So this is not like the easy answer. This is what you do.
Yeah.
This is hey, do you find yourself in the Abram story where God has called you to himself? Said, come to my son Jesus. Come to a Savior you didn't know. Come to a word that you haven't read before. He said, yes, I'm all in.
And an eternal life now.
Yeah. And you're like, all in.
Yeah.
Cool. Are we done? And you're like, no, now I'm going to form you. I'm going to refine you.
Totally.
But I'm faithful to do it. So,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. This is so good, Thomas. Oh my gosh. This is so good. So encouraging for me. So Abram gets tested in chapter 22, right?
Correct.
He takes his son. His son actually carries the wood and the knife up on the mountain. Abram's 100 years old and he's climbing a mountain, by the way. That's pretty amazing. He's in pretty good physical health if he's 100 years old climbing. But he has to, in his mind, in all that he knows, sacrifice his son.
It would appear that way. And I appreciated Mark just pausing for a second and be like, for you who grew up in the church and heard this story and it's white noise to you today.
That was such a great line.
Just stop for a second and be like, this is crazy.
This is nuts.
This is nuts.
Yeah.
And people who are new this morning or maybe hearing this for the first time or have forgotten about this story, like, this is why we don't believe these things.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So there's some cultural elements that we could get into, but I think one, you're looking at the son's carrying the wood, so he's probably stronger than his dad. He could be stronger than his dad at this point. So I think Isaac has to participate in this.
Yep.
But I think the key line is this, in all of it is whatever you get else from the story is finally Abram says to Isaac, the Lord will provide.
Because Isaac asks, where's the sacrifice?
Yeah, where's the sacrifice? I got the wood, got the fire.
I'm helping you up this mountain.
Yeah.
Where's the sacrifice?
The Lord will provide. And I think at this point, Abram, however it functions in him, he just knows God is trustworthy. He's trustworthy.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. That's incredible.
But God does not have him sacrifice his son. We should, if you're listening, you don't know that. He doesn't have him sacrifice his son.
He raises the knife.
Yeah.
He's going
raises
to.
The knife. But I mean, that's like paradigm shift anyway for Abraham, where other gods had asked children to be sacrificed. And God's like, I'm not that God.
It's another cultural sort of beautiful part of the text.
Yeah, like, that's not who I am. This will never be part of worship with me.
I would never ask that of you.
He links it
human beings
to probably that's the Mount of Calvary.
Yeah.
Some proximity, if not almost exact location. I don't know.
The son carries the wood.
Jesus Christ carries the cross, right?
Oh my! It's so. If you're a Christian, you're like, this is it.
Yeah.
And
the only difference, right? And Mark the only difference, is that Jesus dies.
Yeah, the son dies in that story.
Yeah, Jesus dies for us.
The sacrifice is killed there.
Yeah,
and he's the sacrifice.
Which is why John the Baptist, seeing Jesus, says, "Behold, the Lamb." There it is,
the Lamb of God,
the Lamb that Abraham has been waiting for. Behold, there he is.
It's beautiful, man. You've got, and this is maybe just another encouragement. We say this a lot. You've got to read your Old Testament so that your New Testament is so beautiful.
Yeah, comes to life.
So beautiful, man. It's so amazing.
So if if God, this is then the New Testament authors are pointing to this. If he did not spare his own son,
Yeah.
how will he not also give us all things?
Yeah.
So that's the trustworthy of God. That's the trustworthiness of God.
That's back to that. Do you trust God?
Yeah.
Because he didn't spare his own son.
He didn't. Yeah, that's right.
He didn't do it.
What more could he have given us? Nothing. So if
Yeah.
he gave us everything, then can he not be trusted for all things? Absolutely. I'm in.
And that's where you've got to go to Jesus and say, help me to do this.
Especially in the dissonance of,
Right.
okay, I've seen the promises. I see what you've said. You'll always be with me till the end of the age. You'll never leave me or forsake me. You're the God of all comfort. You'll give me wisdom if I ask. Like all these great promises. I just don't see that realized right now. I mean, that 25 years of you making promises and them being fulfilled. But because of the cross, because of what you've done with Abraham and so many others, even in my own life, I trust you.
Yeah.
I trust you.
So the author of Hebrews says this right after that. He says, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. I love that line. That's why Christians get anchors on their arms.
I thought they were because they were sailors.
They sailed the high seas. But it's where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf. Follows it up with that. It's amazing. Just incredible. So, it's back to the Hebrew series that we were talking about. Jesus is greater than. Jesus is greater than Abram. Is the conclusion of this, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus is greater than Abraham because not only did he trust God, he was greater than Isaac. He was the sacrifice. Isaac wasn't the sacrifice. Jesus was the sacrifice. It's amazing. It's greater than.
And he has become greater than the priestly order of Melchizedek.
Oh my goodness. We have another 2 hours of this podcast talking about Melchizedek, which
grab a drink. Here we go.
Yeah, because we're going to talk about Melchizedek for a while in the next section here at Hebrews. It's going to be fun.
Be good. Start kicking it off this Sunday.
Yeah. How many, I don't know if you know this, but how many preachers do we have in Melchizedek? There's at least two.
Yeah. He'll be primarily covered this week.
Yeah. Followed up in coming weeks.
But we'll talk way more about him in the podcast than we will on Sunday.
Yeah, totally. Because this is one of my favorite characters of the Bible. How funny is that? I don't know why. He's one of my favorite characters of the Bible.
He's mentioned 3 times in all of the Bible.
And he's one of my favorite characters. I love it. Hey, Calvary, we're so glad you're with us today. We're so thankful that you're tuning in, joining us in these long conversations about our faith, about what we've been preaching on at Calvary, what we've been learning in ourselves and our own devotional life. We would love to hear from you. You can always reach us at theweekly@calvarybible.com. Also, we would love to be praying for you. Jump on the mobile app, jump online, submit a prayer request. We would love to be coming with you in this season, journeying with you in this dissonance, propping up your faith, putting you in front of the Lord. Hey, we have a great show coming up in the coming weeks. Tune in. You can always subscribe on iTunes or where you find your podcasts. And we will see you next week. And Melchizedek. See you, friends.